Hi and welcome to episode 4 in the Film Scoring for Beginners series. How do you develop a theme in 4 different moods? Maybe you composed a theme for your main character in a film or a game, and now you want to take that same melody and take it into different territories and different emotions. Då kör vi! Right, so in the previous episode, Melody Inspiration and Melody Writing Tips, we developed a melody. And if you want to watch the previous episode, you can click the card up here. Let's now listen to this original melody, and then we will continue and look at how we can transform this theme into a suspense version, into a sad theme, a longing theme version, and a more scary horror theme, a heroic theme, and maybe some jazzy happy version. Right, so this is what the original theme sounds like. Right, so that's our main theme, and it sounds quite heroic at the core. Let's see now how we can convert this heroic theme into a more dark and brooding atmosphere, because maybe we have our character in a tricky situation in the film, and we need to go more dark and brooding with the score. Let's see what we can do to the melody. The beginning of the melody here is a perfect fourth interval. That means that we have an E, and it goes down to a B. And that's an open interval. It sounds quite happy or heroic. It doesn't have that brooding, dark atmosphere that we're after. So what can we do to this happy... What can we do to this happy melody to make it more evil and dark and brooding? The first thing that comes to my mind is making the scale more interesting, because it's only a minor scale at the moment, and a minor scale sounds like this. But how about we make it more interesting by flattening that fifth, that B note, and making it into a B flat instead. And now the scale sounds like this. A little bit more evil, a little bit more scary and horrifying. And why is that? That's because we have this really great dissonance. This evil dissonance between the E and that flatted fifth, that B flat. So that's a dissonant interval. While that previous interval, which was a perfect fourth, sounds much more heroic and open. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind to make with this melody, to make it more dark and evil. And we also need to think about the tempo here, because if we want to make this horror scene, we should maybe go with a slower tempo, a little bit more dark and brooding tempo. And yeah, let's reuse that E minor chord. And maybe add a 9. This G flat. So the melody would sound something like this. So now we instantly have that dark atmosphere. We're going with a slower rhythm, and we're making use of that flatted fifth, that B flat, instead of the B. And I will actually remake the melody a little bit. I will just reuse that beginning, which was a perfect fourth. So that will be the kind of key component which will be reused in the themes here. And maybe we can go down to the C chord. and make the same thing, the same kind of phrase. So now we have effectively converted this heroic theme into a more dark atmosphere. So the chords used in the more dark version is the E minor, but with a flatted fifth. So we have actually a E diminished chord. And then we go down to a C diminished to a C major. So it's not too complicated. So let's see what this sounds when we have arranged this with a few instruments. And as you can see, I only have enough instruments to convey the idea here, and we actually don't want to go overboard as we are only testing out different themes here. So just a few sounds, enough sounds to make it sound good. Less is more. Yeah, so that's basically our dark atmospheric version of the main theme. And I think it turned out quite well, and we could go ahead here and arrange this with maybe a few more sounds and explore a longer arrangement of this cue. But right, so that's the dark atmospheric version. Now let's continue and make a suspenseful and a little bit more heart-beating version of the theme. Right, so we're here at the more suspenseful version of this theme. And we want to make the theme sounding more suspenseful, lurking, and exciting. So how do we awaken suspense? One easy way to awaken suspense and action is to use a pulse of some sorts. And in this cue, I'm using a pulsing bass. In music theory, we call this ostinato. And the melody actually is quite similar to the original melody. I'm just making some minor adjustments here at the end. But let's listen to the theme, and then we will discuss what happened with the melody. Okay, so what happened to the melody here? Well, it begins exactly like the original melody, except that we're playing it at a slower tempo, just like we did in the previous example. And we're also making use of a little bit more chromatic flavors in the melody. So we have that E going on in the bass. And while we have the E going on in the bass, we can basically play anything on top of this, as long as we don't have a sustained third in our chord. And the third in E is the G in E minor. But if we don't play that G, we can basically play anything, as long as we play in the upper range, obviously. I talk about this in some previous video too. So the theme plays the same melody, but at a slower tempo. And there we have that flatted fifth again, which is the B turning into a B flat, which gives us a E minor diminished, or E diminished chord. But basically, as I said, as long as we don't have the third in our chord, we can play anything on top here. So and at this point, we're here in the melody. And now something interesting is happening, because that G sharp or A flat is actually the third, the major third in E. So it actually turns into a major sounding chord. Especially since we have that seventh on the bottom here. So at this point, we actually have a E major seventh chord. But all the other stuff in our cue sounds minor. Because that's here we have the G played in the melody, which is the minor third. And here suddenly we play the major. So that's also an exciting, adds to the excitement of this cue, that we have this minor and major relation suddenly happening in the melody. And then the melody goes. And that C is the sixth in our minor E minor scale, and then ends on a B, which is the fifth in our E scale. So that's a little bit what went behind the thoughts of the melody. So I did a little bit of chromatic and didn't really worry about if this was going into the minor or major chord. So it might be far out there, but it's really great for suspenseful cues to have this nerve and interesting drama in the melody. So that's the thought process that went behind to create this cue. Right, so we've reached a love scene in our film, and we need some kind of loving, caring, and maybe a little bit of nostalgic sounding theme for that scene. So what can we do to that original heroic theme to convert it into a more longing kind of theme? A quick reminder here of the original theme. Let's play it over again. So we need some kind of way to make this heroic theme into a love theme. And what comes to my mind is maybe have a falling bass, because a falling bass instantly gives us a little bit of nostalgic feeling. And maybe have an arpeggio playing in the left hand. So something like... and with a melody. So to me, a combination of that falling bass, that we have the E going to the D, to the C, and to that B, a dominant seventh chord, gives it a really kind of nostalgic feeling. And also with that repeating phrase, that arpeggio in the left hand. So let's listen to a quick arrangement of the love theme. Again, we're just using a quick little instrumentation just to convey the idea and see if this will work. And I think that this, it sounds like a longing and sad kind of theme, perfect for a love scene or something. Right, so let's continue to the next mood. So let's listen to the heroic version of our theme. Right, so let's explain the thought process behind creating this adventure version, this heroic adventure version of the theme. And actually, we already had a quite heroic kind of theme in the original melody. The original melody was... And that already sounds kind of heroic, but I wanted to take it further and make it more adventurous. And thus I made a variation on the melody here. So we have, instead of the... we have... so a little bit more bounce to the melody, and that ostinato in the background. And as you can see, I also added some runs in between these places where we don't have the melody. And this kind of runs also helps to make this sound more adventurous. And of course we add the trumpet to give it that heroic kind of vibe also. We could add a French horn, but maybe for a B part in this little arrangement. You also see we have a piccolo flute here, which is a patch from the East-West play, the solo piccolo flute, which gives a run on the piccolo flute, an octave up. So we have this as a kind of fill between these parts where we don't have the melody. And I added a quick marching kit orchestral drum. And obviously that marching kit snare also helps to make this sell the idea of a more adventurous kind of cue. And in the intro we have a roll on the Wagner bass drum, also from East-West Symphonic Orchestra percussion. I still use some of these patches from that old Symphonic Orchestra package. They are still, it's still a very good package. And we have, this is actually some cymbals. So it's a cymbal swell that leads into the beginning of the cue here. So in conclusion, to make this more heroic, we used ostinato in the background, and we made the melody a little bit more bouncy and repeating patterns. And we added some piano arpeggios in the background here, in between the melody lines, and also the piccolo run. And some marching kit to also sell the idea of an adventurous cue. Right, so I hope that after today's video you will be able to convert your own cues into these different moods. If you have any questions, please write that in the comment section below. Now you can continue and watch my next video. Right, so that's all for the Film Scoring for Beginners episode 4. I hope to see you in the next video. My name is Mattias. Bye. När isen spricker upp till en sol vi håller kär, du väljer nu din väg, och månen flyter bort